Greetings and welcome to Hexed Encountered. I'm Joe. In this video, we're going to be doing a gameplay, or begin gameplay here, of the game Band of Brothers, Stalin's Favorite. And this is scenario number 80. We'll have to take this task upon ourselves. It takes place in Lublin, Poland, January 19th, 1945. And here's the description. After the 8th Guards Army seized the Magnejev bridgehead on the western bank of the Vistula, the 12th Guards Tank Corps, previously the 16th Tank Corps, were subordinated to assist them in beating off numerous German counterattacks. When therefore they rejoined the 2nd Guards Tank Army for the breakout from the bridgehead, all vehicles but 100 new T-34s were worn out. After a heavy artillery barrage, the 5th Shock Army and 8th Guards Army breached the German defenses, and the tank army swept through. Such was the pace of the advance that German defenders were often caught unprepared. The 49th Guards Tank Brigade overran an operational airfield as it took the town of Lublin Kuyavsky. Upon hearing the aircraft warming up their engines, Senior Lieutenant Amutani said, "We'll have to take this task upon ourselves." Our special rules: terrain changes. There are no wheat fields. The wheat field on board 39, right here, represents the airfield. And the missing board of 42, south of 42, right here, represents a lake. Line of sight may be traced as if a board of clear hexes was present. So the hexes over here can see the hexes over here, and vice versa. Hexes A to H of 37 and 39, these two, and you can see the edge of a little mat I've laid down to mark that as out of play. Those are out of play. We have night rules in effect. Visibility range is only 4 hexes. Snow was present, but the effects of that are superseded by night movement rules. Parked aircraft, we're going to put 4 Stuka counters, which I have not placed yet, in hexes 39J1, K1, L1, and M2. These are treated as vehicles with an all-around armor rating of 2, an all-around rear vulnerability, and a bracketed rating of 3, and no modifier for rear attacks. Russian tanks may crush them in the same manner as guns. They may not be activated until turn 3. And their only possible action is to attempt takeoff by passing a proficiency check. A Stuka that passes its check is moved directly southwards. No movement allowance or movement points are involved. Passing through any Russian units until it is destroyed by op fire or it exits the airfield, in which case it has taken off safely and is removed from the game. Russian squads may enter as tank riders, and I will show you that here in a moment. Crushing rule: Russian T-34s can crush things, as we just mentioned. There are 2 German guns that can be crushed by the Soviets in addition to the aircraft. There are no decoys. The absence of German decoys represents the help given to the Russians by the local Polish citizens. And rear echelon troops use the 1944 stats for Panzerfausts, representing stocks of the older model. So obviously this is 45. The Germans were kind of reaching the bottom of the barrel in terms of manpower and equipment, and that is reflected in these rules. Our victory conditions: the Russians will win by having 9 or more victory points at game's end. Each aircraft destroyed is worth 1, and each multi-hex building on boards 37 and 39, these 2, is worth 1 victory point. If a side has sole occupancy of a building, it gains control of all of its hexes. So they don't have to occupy all of the hexes in these multi-hex buildings. They only have to occupy 1, as long as the enemy is not occupying any of the other hexes. Our startup, or yes, at start, there are no reinforcements in this particular scenario. The at start forces on the Soviet side, they start on board 42, right here. They have 6 T-35, or T-34s, I'm sorry, 6 T-34-85s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They have 2 half tracks. They are at the back. These 2 right here, they're M3s. 6 Type B squads. They are riding on the tanks. That is a special rule that's in effect, so they are underneath the tank. They're right there. And 2 submachine gun squads are on the M3s, or in the M3s, and they're right. There's an example right there. They had to set up on road hexes east of column L. Column L is right here. So they are all east of that. On the German side, We have on board 39, adjacent to the airfield, 3 second-line squads. So you see 1, 2, 3. 1 second-line machine gun weapon team right there. 1 20-millimeter gun right there. And 1 foxhole, and one of the squads is in the foxhole. It's right here. Then on board 37, over here, the Germans have 4 Volksgrenadier squads. No, that's a weapons team, I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4. They also have a 1 first-line machine gun, that's the weapon team right here, and then they have a 75-millimeter gun right here. And you can see there are a multitude of multi-hex buildings. There's 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, and 1 and 1. So several for the Soviets to try to capture by the end of the scenario. This is a 9-turn scenario. It is completely at night, and the visibility range is 4. So having said all that, we're going to get started here. Let me reframe my shot, and then we're going to get underway. Okay, so by scenario rule, the Russians move first. The Germans set up first, and I actually did do it that way, even though I'm playing this solitaire. The lack of decoys in this scenario makes this very solitaire friendly. So again, this is scenario number 80. Okay, so since the Soviets go first, their command range is 3 to 6. Okay, so I'm going to assume that mostly that you know how this game works, so I won't go overly much into explaining the rules. I have other videos from this particular band, from Band of Brothers. I've played Ghost Panzer for sure. So I think I played the Screaming Eagles maybe as well. I don't remember, but I have I have the whole run. So I know for a fact I did Ghost Panzer during one of my Tanktoberfest sequences. So we're going to activate our T-34 here. Now you have a German gun here, but it's only a 20-millimeter. Take a quick look at it. This is the 20-millimeter gun. You can see at the bottom 6/3 and 20 millimeters indicating. Then it's got a 9 in that lower right corner, and that is its proficiency rating. And then above that, you have the 3 morale levels. 10 is normal morale, 6 is suppressed, and 2 is heavily suppressed. Fully suppressed, sorry. All right, and then the arrow at the top indicates it's facing. So facing for vehicles and guns is important, and they have to face a hex spine, one of the vortices here. So it's facing this way. Now you may have noticed I did not actually mention a range here, because what they have is their proficiency number. So to look at this again, the number at the top, the 5/9, those 2 numbers, that's its attack rating for vehicle and then infantry. So its attack on a vehicle is a 5, and the /9 is its attack on soft targets like infantry and other guns. Now, if we take a look at our T-34 here, on up there at the top, you see 13/10. That works the same way. The 13 is when it attacks another vehicle. The 10 is when it attacks a soft target. And then below that, you have 8/5. The 8 is its front armor, and the 5 is its side and rear armor. So the gun could, in theory, fire at the tank. And it does have infantry riders on it. So in effect, it would really be firing at the infantry that's riding on the tank. So if we wanted to do it with op fire, which is what this would be, because it is not the Germans' turn, and this tank has a movement factor of 15, so it can get up nice and close. Our infantry here is also equipped with Panzerfausts, so they could fire those as well. But what we're going to do here, I think, we have to move the tanks up. You know, this is the Russians weren't afraid of taking casualties, to be sure. And I'm trying to get this lined up nicely here. So they're going to activate our tank, and we're going to move it. Okay, so if we move 1, right, and then let's say that this gun is going to shoot, because the gun is going to try to kill the tank riders. So we have here again, its attack rating is a 9. That's its firepower. Okay, so it's going to have to roll for proficiency, and it's a 9. So it really, as long as it rolls, and here are our dice, and let me pull this in so you can see it. So I'm going to roll the black die, and if it's anything under, if it's a 9 or under, they pass. And it's not, it's a 10. And a 10 is always a miss. So that is bad news for the Germans. These guys are now marked as used, and these guys can continue to move. So that we're on a road, and so here's our terrain effects card. Okay, and on a road, you treat as open ground, right? As far as terrain goes, movement factor for a infantry unit is 2/3, and it's half for a vehicle. Okay, so they've moved 1, and we're going to continue the move, but just to talk about the squad anti-tank weapons possessed by these German squads here. They all have 1944 version Panzerfausts, which have a firepower of 22, which is really good, but the range is only 2. So the tank now is basically impervious to any attacking until it gets within 2 hexes of these units. So what we're going to do here is we are going to continue to move. So that only costs a half. So moving here would be 1, 2, 2.5, 3, right? So now the range from here is 1, 2, 3. They move up 1 more, they're in range of the Panzerfaust. So we're going to stop right here. And we're going to mark move, because they moved, right? And they would still be moving. In effect, that means they moved, which impacts the attacks of the enemy. And we're also going to mark them as being used. Although we could actually, you know what? Let's hold up a bit. You can fire after moving, so let's do that. So we have our squad sitting on top here. So if we fire, we dismount the infantry automatically. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to fire at the gun. Okay. So this would be here with our T-34. We'd be firing with the main gun or the machine gun, if you will, at the gun, which is considered a soft target for these purposes. So we're going to roll against a 10 firepower. And if we look at this guy, he's got casualty numbers at the bottom of 6/3. Let me put the used back on there. Now that's 6/3. In some cases, the first number, well, let's just say for the gun, the 6 is if it's being attacked by infantry or artillery, and the 3 is if it's being attacked by a gun or a vehicle. In this case, it is, of course, being attacked by a tank. So that means its casualty rating is a 3. So now we have a fire attack to do. So we're going to figure this out, right? So right here on our player aid card, we have the procedure here, right? So we have to do a proficiency check, and we'll do that in a moment. And if it's passed, then we roll against the infantry firepower using modifiers from the table. And then for canister, we're not going to worry about canister. He could fire canister, but well, actually he can't because he's a tank. But we're going to basically roll against the infantry firepower of the tank, which is 10, and use the table. They are in they're in open terrain, and open terrain is not going to give them any benefits. They are not concealed. So basically you have your terrain here, right? And you go through here and you find, right? And open ground gives you no benefit, right? But down here you also have situations like hindering, concealed, adjacent, moving in open ground, final op fire, et cetera, et cetera. None of these apply either. So basically what we're going to be doing is rolling that, assuming we pass the proficiency test, we're going to be rolling against that 10, which means it's basically guaranteed to hit. And I already made a mistake. Back when the gun fired, it should not have been able to fire because the vehicle was further out than 4. Our visibility range is only 4. Now the range from here to there is 3. So that's going to reduce his proficiency rating or his roll, his die roll by 3. So his proficiency is only a 6. So we're going to do it anyway. He's going to fire. But he takes a -3. So I'm going to roll here with this. Let me put this here so you can see it. And we rolled a 6. And so that means that he needed a 3 and he rolled a 6. So he failed. So now I'm going to put a used marker on there. And I'm going to bring the infantry off since he fired. And we're just there. So I'm using the infantry on top as indicating they're not mounted. So they're both used. The infantry automatically becomes used as well. Now that is 3 operation points for using a vehicle. So they have 3 left. Operations points, that is. And we're going to move these guys up and do the same, essentially the same thing, right? They'll go 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to move off into well, let's see, where do we want to move them to? That is the question here. Look at our terrain effects here. If we just go, so moving in open ground costs 1. So we're going to go, well, he was here, so he went 1, 2, 3, 4. Now they're in range, or visibility range at least, of these guys. But we're going to move them up even further here. So that's 4, 5. And then we're going to go here to 6. Okay, and then we're going to fire again. And we're going to end up doing the same thing and knocking our riders off, or making the riders dismount is really what's happening. And they're going to fire at a range of 2 at the weapons team. Okay, they are in a building. So let's roll the proficiency check first. And if we look again at our notes for proficiency check, there are no hindrances. They're just in a building. All right, so we're still going to take a -2 on the die roll for the fact that they're in a building, or it's at night rather, and it's a 9. So again, they miss. So they're going to also get a used marker. Okay, now that's 6 because we activated 2 vehicles. So now the Germans would be active and they can do something. Now, since we have a squad here that's equipped with a Panzerfaust, they are in these round buildings here. They're going to fire at this tank because it's 2 away, so it's within range, okay? So you don't use things like the proficient firepower or anything else here. You just roll against the morale, so you do a morale check, and their morale's a 10. But there's a modifier for the firing from a building. So we're in the 1944 column for the Panzerfaust, which is here. So you can see that's the firepower in the range, and then it takes a -2 to the SATW morale check. Okay, so our squad anti-tank weapon, right? So our morale's a 10, so we're going to roll, and if we get an 8 or less, it's a good shot. So they did fire. We got a 6. Okay, so I take it back because I read the rest of this here, infantry versus vehicle squad anti-tank weapon. So the squad's SATW number, which was 2, right, which made it an 8. It wasn't op fire. The firer was not marked as op fire. Was not assault fire. No smoke. No hindrance. -2 if a bazooka, Panzerschreck, or Panzerfaust is firing from a building. Difficult to use from backblast. That does take effect, so that's a -4. Okay. And then -1 for each hex of range. And the range is 2. So that means we needed a 4, and we rolled a 6, as you can see. So that did not work. So that's the Germans' activation. Now their command range is 2 to 6. They've used 1 because they have to use at least 2. So we have a gun as well that you saw previously, but it does not have the visibility because of the distance. Now this one's going to try the same thing because, again, We have to use 2 operation points. So we're going to fire this squad next, and we're going to have it do the same exact thing. So we know now that we need a 4, and we'll roll, and we got a 4. So this time we did hit, and now we will roll against, and I used the wrong die. I try to use the black for the Germans and the white for the Soviets. And so now now for the infantry versus vehicles using the squad anti-tank weapon, once you pass your check, you roll against the firepower, which is a 22. We're firing at the front armor of the vehicle, which is an 8. So that's a 14. But you still have to roll because it's guaranteed to be a hit. They don't have any protecting, any kind of hindrance or anything on here that's going to protect them because they're in open ground. And they actually moved as well, but I don't know that because this is after. So it's at night and moving in open ground. Range is 2, so that would be a +1. But that's not, it really doesn't matter. Basically, I'm going to roll this unless I roll a 0 for 10. It's a hit, and that tank is going to be destroyed. And it's an 8. So this tank has been destroyed. And I'm going to pull that off, and I'm going to put that on there because the infantry is still there. So I am going to mark the that squad here as used. And now we go back to the Soviets. The Germans will now stop. They activated 2. That's all they had to do. Actually, you know what? I take that back. We have our machine guns here. Let's fire at this squad that's in open ground, okay? So they would automatically pass the morale check because it's at a 10 right now. All right, so infantry fire attack here. So we're going to get to use our normal firepower, which in this case is a 7. I'd like to make a couple of corrections here. So night effects, okay. Any hex costs a minimum of 1.5 movement points for infantry because they're not Japanese. Japanese would not be affected by this, and 2 for vehicles. So they could still get where they got, I believe. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Actually, he couldn't. I'm going to leave it, I guess, because I already played it through. But technically, that would have been wrong because the most they could have gone with 15 would be 7, which would have put him here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He would have been here. Same for this guy. He was here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's good there. Other firepower modifiers for moving in open ground is +2 at range 1, +1 at range 2, and 0 for range 3 or higher. Vehicles and guns must always pass a proficiency check with an additional -1 to their proficiency rating per hex of range to a max of -4. And an unilluminated unit beyond visibility range is out of line of sight. And a unit that loses... I wasn't really using concealment in theory because of the night rules. All the Germans would have been concealed. But we'll keep it simple. Muzzle flashes. Whenever an unilluminated unit fires, it may immediately be fired upon by one unused unit, which is not in visibility range, as if that unit were illuminated. If it fires its morale check, another unit cannot be selected. This response is not considered op fire, so an infantry unit would use its normal firepower, and units marked op fire are ineligible. Interesting. Okay. So, with that in mind, okay, I'm going to say that they can't be, I'm just not going to fire at them with the machine gun, as the flip side of the fact that I moved these guys too far under night rules, and they lost a tank because of it. So I won't undo that, but I'm not going to allow the weapons team to fire in this activation, and we'll move on to the next activation for the Soviets, and they're going to move their Vehicles up, and I'm going to do this correctly this time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they will stop there. And they're just going to stop. I'm going to put a move marker on there as well as a used marker. They're not going to fire or anything. They'll just stop right there. Then for their other one, they'll do the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going to stick to the road. We're going to put a move and a used. Now we go back to, trying to get it to like stay. There you go. All right, we're going to go back to the Germans now. And now I will allow my weapons team here to fire at the Soviet squad here. Now our distance is 2. As I said, their morale is a 10, so they will pass their morale check, and they will fire at the infantry there with the number that they're going to be using. And I'll turn this up so it's right side up since they're not riding anymore. And we don't use facing in Europe. You can, but I'm choosing not to. So we are going to fire at them here. Their casualty numbers are 3, 7. So depending on what we roll, we need to roll a 7 or more. And I don't know that they get the movement. Yeah, they don't get the movement penalty, I don't think. They rolled a 9, so that's going to be a miss anyway. So I'm going to mark them used. And then I think what I'll do is I'm going to mark one of my units at the bottom as used and not activate them, only because the Soviets won't get to them this turn anyway. So I'm just going to mark one of my units down there as used to fill up my 2 operations. And we'll go to the third activation of this turn. And we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to move these guys up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll mark them both as moved and used. The move really doesn't matter here because we're not going to be firing at them, but you still do it because that's what the rules say to do. Now we'll go over to the Germans again, and again I'm going to just mark 2 units as being used here. And that will end that. And I know that's off camera. I figured this is where the action is taking place, so this is where we would be most interested in seeing. This will be the last activation of the turn for the Russians. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And this guy's going to end up there. And we're going to put 2 moves, which indicates that they're moving, so that next turn they can just continue to move, basically. Then for the Germans, I'm going to do the same thing, and we're just going to pass and say that the turn is over. These guys were not in range. I'm not going to move them or anything. I mean, I could put a used on there just to say that they're done and mark one of the other units at the bottom as used, or the remaining 3 that are there to say, okay, we're done and the turn is over, and we go to turn 2. But first we're going to clean up here. So we'll clean up and reset and prep for turn number 2. Okay, we've zoomed out a little bit here, and you can see the move markers remain on the tanks that moved. We had a tank eliminated. It's actually sitting right here, but we have an infantry squad right here. We have an infantry squad dismounted here. Infantry squads mounted on these 4 T-34s, and then of course we have the M3s at the back. So what we're going to do here is the Soviets get to go first again. And what we're going to try to assault. And we're going to try to assault. I think we're going to go after this weapons team right here. Because if we can knock that out, that would be to our benefit. Now, I did widen the shot a little bit so that we can see the northern part of this area, just in case things go extremely well, which is unlikely to happen in turn 2. Even if things go extremely well, it's unlikely we'll get down in this area during this turn. Because of the night movement rules, things move a little slower. We also have to keep in mind our special rules as far as our parked aircraft that I still forgot to put out. So let me do that right now. I did forget to put the Stukas out, but I'm going to do that right now. Okay, I've placed our aircraft. They're up here, right? So basically, they're parked and they're going to travel this way. Now, again, according to the scenario rules, they don't do anything except try to escape. And they can't be activated until turn 3. So now that I've got them set up, the Soviets weren't in range of them or anything, so there was no harm, no foul in not having them out. I just simply forgot to do it. Okay, so to get back to what we were going to try and do here, we are going to try to move this guy. Now it costs two-thirds on road, but we're not on road. So the nighttime movement for infantry is 1.5 plus any hex side stuff, but we don't have any hex side stuff yet. So I think, well, let's consider if we just simply attack these guys here. They're in a building, okay? At least I think that's a building. Looks like one, right? So I believe that would be a wooden building, and that would have an impact of, come on now, -1 on the infantry firepower. Their firepower is a 5 with a range of 2. My autofocus isn't working all that well for some reason. Yeah, I'm sorry. The range is 5. The 2 is their proficient firepower. So we're just going to fire, I think. So it's 5, and we get a -1 for the building, plus a -1 for the, actually a -2 for the distance. That would mean we would need to roll a 1 or a 2 to hit. That's rough. That's really rough. It is very, very rough. Let's consider this here for a second. Maybe we should try to just move up and assault. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to move this guy up. He's going to move here. We'll take our op fire opportunity from the Germans, which isn't prepared op fire, so they would use their proficient firepower, which is only a 1. So in this case, they're not worth it, because you're going to lose 1. Well, let's do it. We're going to roll 1 die. I'll roll the black one. I'm going to roll 1 die. If we roll a 1 is an automatic hit no matter what. And we rolled a 7. So they're just going to get marked used. And now we'll move this again into here for an assault. And the assault happens later on. So we're just going to leave that for now. Okay, so that happens. I'm sorry, I was calling it assault. It's melee. It'll happen in the melee phase, which happens after the operations phase, and actually after the rout phase as well. But nobody's taken any suppression yet, so there hasn't been any morale effects as of yet. Now, we have our second dismounted here. Now, I also haven't used or talked about command points yet, but we will see some of that in this turn, because I do have a couple of uses in mind for them, and we'll get to that here in a minute. Now, one thing I did want to talk about here is the reason why they assaulted or went into melee. Is you notice here they do not have a melee firepower, because it would be a subscript after the 5/2, but the weapons team, this machine gun, does, because they're not all that good in melee, because it's just a single, well, it's not necessarily a single, but it's a weapons team, right? And it's got a 2. So their firepower is greatly reduced in melee. So now we're going to move to this unit here. And I think I have to put a used on them, but I don't know if I do that right now or not. Okay, so we're going to Well, let's have this guy fire at the gun again. Now his firepower is a 10 and his proficiency is a 6. So he's going to fire. The range is 3. So he's going to, again, need a 3 because of the -3 for the nighttime firing at night. Okay. Now, the other thing that we didn't really talk about, if I remember correct, well, maybe we did earlier, is that once he fires, the muzzle flash will illuminate him, and that will allow free. That means that other units can see him and fire without penalty, which would affect these guys, except that he's 3 away, but it will affect the gun itself. So the gun can fire back. I mean, it's a 20 millimeter gun, and a 20 millimeter gun against T-34s was not exactly something that would be in the favor of the Germans here. So we're going to resolve the fire here. So we have a vehicle versus a gun, which is the same as firing at infantry. So the firepower we're looking at is a 10, but first we have to roll to see if they actually are able to make the shot, which is going to need a 3 or less. And unfortunately, they rolled a 10, which is automatically a miss, regardless of the odds. So they're just going to get marked. It's used. And that's 2 activations. Now we'll activate this infantry, and we will have the infantry move up on the gun. So he's going to go here. Now it's 2 rather. So we have other squads that can fire at him, but again, since they're not set for op fire, because the Germans haven't activated yet, they would have to use their proficient firepower, which is a 1 from these guys. So it's not even worth. I mean, you could in theory say, okay, we're going to do it because we did it down here, but the chances of rolling a 1, you have a 10% chance, right? Simple math there. So they're not going to take opportunity fire. Now these guys will go 1 more to here. And now we can do what's called assault fire. And that would be an assault fire on the gun there. So this would be proficient firepower, okay? Now I'm going to use a command point. The Soviets get 2 command points per turn. This is what the command point chit looks like. I'm just going to put this on here to indicate that it has been used. That's 1 of our 2. We have 1 more. And what that will do is allow them to raise their proficient firepower by 1. So this 2 would become a 3. Now, the other thing we can do is have these guys take. We might as well try and take a pot shot at him to suppress him, maybe before he can actually use his assault fire on the gun. And for that, we can use our the gun itself, have the gun fire opportunity fire, even though it is in a situation where it's going to have to roll against its proficiency, which is a 9. So that's a good number. It's a 9. The range is only 1, so it's only going to take a 1 hit on that. So it gets a -2 on its proficiency check for op fire. So that 9 becomes an 8, and then it becomes a 6. But just like the Soviets, the Germans have command points as well. And I think we can use this, and we're going to use this on the gun to give them a 1-point bonus here on their proficiency check. So it becomes a 7. So as long as they roll a 7 or better, and they rolled a 10, so that fails. So they do not successfully fire at them. Now, so we're going to resolve our fire here. So they have a 3, and they do take a -1. And they're not in, the gun is not in any kind of terrain that is beneficial. So they're going to get a, well, actually, the gun fired at them, so that would illuminate it, I would guess, and then that would mean that the night thing would not really affect it that much. Let me confirm that. In the rules, night is handled in number 50, which is actually on page 24. And it says that we're moving. So they should have gotten a +2, the Germans, that is. But they rolled a 10, which is automatically a miss, so it doesn't really matter. The Germans would be able to fire at it as if it was illuminated. But I don't know that we're going to actually do that. So their firepower is a 3, and I believe they don't take the minus for night because he fired. So a 3 is still not that great, and he doesn't get any benefits from terrain. So this is a fairly easy die roll here. Keep moving the board, I'm sorry. And a 2. And a 2. So what that does is suppresses him, because the difference is only 1. And so that's going to suppress him. And we mark this guy as used. And that's now 2 used. Oh, no, 4. I'm sorry, because, oh, wait, no, we did use a tank. So we've used 1, 2, and 3 is 5. So we have 1 left. And because we don't have enough to activate another vehicle, all of these are vehicles that are carrying troops. We're gonna end and pass back over to the Germans. So the Germans will now get to go. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to do 2 things. We're going to put an op fire marker on this guy and on this guy. Though I could maybe just fire this guy. We're going to fire this guy because the range is only 1. They were illuminated because they fired, although I think that only applies on, like, you can fire at them, and I probably should have, but I didn't because I chose to wait. So it's 4 minus 1, but they moved, so they get a +2. So it's going to be a +1. The Germans need a 5 or less. They get a 3. So their casualty rating is a 3. So they're below that. So they're just going to be suppressed. They're going to be used. And now we've got an op fire marker here. And the Germans have used 2, because placing the op fire counts as an action or an operational action. This also costs 1. So that is 2, and they'll pass back. I guess they'll pass back. I don't know. Should I move somebody? Because I can. I think I'm going to hold off on moving anybody. The Germans are playing defense. Let's let them come to, from the German side, we're going to let the Russians come to us and try to, take advantage of being on the defense, I guess, essentially. So now we'll go back to the Soviets, and they still have 6 units to activate. And let's move our tanks, and we're going to go in this direction, up towards the airfield. So each one of these will cost 2, and they have a movement factor of 15. So if we go 2, 4, now once we're here, they can use their op fire. So they're going to op fire at the riders, because you have to pick one. So they'll op fire at the tank riders and not the tank because they're infantry. So this is op fire against tank riders. Okay, so it's marked as op fire. So that'll give a +1 to its proficient, which makes it a 2. They're moving at night at a range of 2. So that is a +1 as well. Now, so that's a +2. So that's becomes a 3. But because of the range, it becomes a -2, I believe. So that would also reduce it back to a 1, but we will use a second command point to make it a 2. And we'll roll our die. And we got a 6, so it failed. So we burn our command point. They get marked as used, and they can continue their move. So they started here, and we went 2, 4, 6. Now we're going into an orchard. So if we look at the orchard here, its movement is a 1, which is the same. So that would be a 2 as well. So 2, 4, 6. Actually, they can't move again because they are done. So we're going to mark them as used. The move marker will stay. Okay, excuse me. But now they're getting close, although they won't be able to do anything until next turn. So we're going to send the next tanks out that way too. 2, 4, 6. Mark them as used. That's 6, so their movement is, their actions are done. We flip back to the German side. Now a lot of these guys are done. So the units down here, we'll just mark the first 2 as used at the bottom, which is off shot, but that's okay. They just pass. And that is the end of the Germans, because they're only going to use 2. We'll go back to the Russians, and we'll have these guys move as well. We'll send these guys this way. And we'll go 2, 4, 6, and stop there. Right, so things move a little more slowly at night, obviously, because we're getting 2, cost of 2 to move this little bit here. So we'll go 2, 4, 6. Do that. Go back to the Germans. I'm going to mark 2 more down here as used. And that's now back to the Soviets for their last move. 2, 4, 6. 2, 4, 6. And that's going to be the end of turn 3's operation phase. However, we have a melee to deal with. Now, you would do a route check. And so we are going to have to do a route check for these 2 units because they're both suppressed. So this one has a morale, suppressed morale of 5. And this one has a suppressed morale of 6. Now, in theory, the requirements for route checks would apply to more units, but everybody's base morale is a 10, and it's impossible to roll less than a 10. To roll higher than a 10 in this situation, because there aren't any modifiers that would change that. So we have to roll for the attacker first. That's the Soviets, or the side with initiative, really. So they need a 5 or lower, and they get a 7. Now, what happens when you fail your route roll? So you have to route, and you use your normal movement allowance, and it doesn't trigger op fire. Their movement allowance is a 5, so they can move 2 hexes. Actually, let me think about that. 2/3. So 2. They can move. So 5 divided by 1.5, they can basically move 3, because that would be 4.5. So they're going to move. They have to move away from the enemy. So 1, 2, 3, and they stop there. Now we'll do the Germans. They need a 6 or less, and they also fail. If a gun fails a morale check during the route phase, it is eliminated unless it is being transported. So the gun is knocked out because it failed its route check. So essentially, it has B, and that gives us our thing back, our command point, rather. I'm going to put that there. That is now eliminated. And that opens things up a little bit for the Russians, and that ends the route phase. Now we come to the melee phase. So whenever an infantry unit occupies the same location as an enemy infantry unit or gun, they are considered in melee, even though melee combat's not resolved until after the route phase. So the player moving first in the scenario decides, and we only used 1 command point, I believe, on the Russians. So we're going to use, yeah, it's right there. We're going to use our second one, perhaps. You roll both dice. Melee is pretty simple. So basically, a unit with a subscripted melee firepower uses that, which the Soviets don't have. So they're going to use their normal firepower, which is a 5. So we're going to roll 2 dice. And they got a 1 and a 4. So the 1 is a big deal. And the 4 would be a suppression, but the 1 is bad news for the Germans. And all fire is simultaneous, so we still roll for the Germans to see what they do to the Russians. But this is bad news for the German unit. Because in melee, each number less than the firepower eliminates or reduces a unit. So the machine gun's going to be eliminated. Now let's roll for the machine gun, and their proficient fire, or their melee firepower is only a 2. And they get a 2, but they also got a 10. So they're going to reduce. The Russians are going to get reduced, but they're going to capture this building. And the German weapon team has been eliminated. So I'm going to put them here. This is our stack of eliminated Germans. And so now they've taken the building, but they have been reduced, this Russian infantry squad. All right, so now that we've completed that, we go to the recovery phase. So all units marked with suppression, except in those still in melee, recover 1 full step of suppression. So from yellow, they would go to full morale. So we remove this from this guy because he's the only one that still has one. Then we would pull off all the used op fire, CP, which is command points, flank, sustained fire, illumination, etc. So, and moves and unconfirmed kill counters are not removed. So I'm going to do that off camera like I did before, but we're going to stop the video here. And we'll pick up with episode 2 here in a little bit. We are going into turn 3. So we will get to see the Stukas try to leave and all that stuff coming up here in the next part. And that is going to do it. So if you have questions or comments, of course, please let me know. I do try to keep my videos reasonably short, but the next one might be longer because of the situation. I'd like to get at least 5 turns in to show the game as much as possible. Ideally, I do the whole thing, but I know interest decreases in each video that comes in the series. So we'll stop here, as I said. So thank you for watching. As I said, any comments or questions, feel free to post them. I will do my best to reply. But that's going to do it. Please consider liking, sharing, and or subscribing. And I'm Joe. This is Hexed Encountered. Until next time, as always, happy gaming.